Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns and in today's video we're going to start refreshing the guide series by taking a look at solo salvage and the Drake Vulture. Vulture salvaging is probably one of the best things to move on to after you find your feet in the verse, if you're looking to rack up some cash. It doesn't take much to get set up to start, and you can bring in the proverbial bacon without putting too much risk on the table. So if this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. In terms of non-combat professions in SC, Salvage probably has one of the lowest barriers to entry. The in-game cost of a Vulture is towards the low end, and unlike in mining, you don't have to wait around for your payday, so you can get out, get mats, and sell up in a single session. A big reason I like to make these aUEC earning-focused guides is because, despite what a few Kotaku articles may lead you to believe, all you needed to get going in Star Citizen is a $45 game pack. All the rest you can earn in-game. At least to begin with, you'll certainly learn more about the game by starting at the bottom and working your way to the top. If you do decide to hop in, just make sure to use a referral code to get a bit of extra starter cash on your account. Mine's the one up on screen, but if you've got any friends who play already, please do just use theirs. So before we embark on our salvage mission, it's worth making sure we've got the right tools for the job. First up, we'll start with the ship itself and loadout. A Drake Vulture will set you back 2.65 million credits, and you can pick one up from the New Deal ship shop at Lorville and Hurston. You'll then want to add a few components. I would say your must-haves are an upgraded QT drive, I personally prefer the Atlas for a mix of good fuel economy and speed, and a pair of Abrade salvage modules. Keep in mind when you're replacing salvage modules on the Vulture that you have two lasers, so you will need to buy two modules. The Vulture does come stock with two cinch modules, which are pretty awful, one Abrade and one tractor beam. So you'll just need as a baseline to grab that one extra Abrade to pair up with the one you already have. For my full build, I also put a pair of Trawler modules on my Vulture, for if I'm called in to do a cleanup mission, and then the military spec A components for all the other slots. 3 FR66 shields, 2 JS300 power plants and 2 glacier coolers. The Vulture is not good for much in a fight, so we'd be focusing on running away if caught out, and mil-spec A components will just give you the best chance of surviving long enough to flee, so they're worth a bit of extra investment in the long term in my opinion. If you are strapped for cash in the beginning, just do the QT drive and those Abrade modules, and then we can get going. Next up though is our personal loadout. Always remember space is dangerous. And when we're out salvaging in our little Vulture, we'll be hauling around a decent payday for any wannabe pirates. So armour up and gun up. There's no shame in losing your haul to a pirate crew. If the game had no danger, it'd get boring pretty quick. But I think there is shame in giving up without firing a single shot because you didn't bring a gun with you. Pistols are better than nothing, but ultimately you'll want some form of long arm with you if you really want to put up a fight. You will also absolutely need a multi-tool and tractor beam attachment so that you can move boxes on board your ship. Optional but recommended extras include med pens and or a med gun, just in case you have an accident, spare ammo for your gun, and some form of sustenance. Cruise Lux is my beverage of choice. I also tend to use the second weapon slot on my backpack for a max lift tractor beam. It's actually not ideal or required for this loop, but it gives me a backup tractor if my multi-tool gets bugged or I lose it for some reason. So now that we're all set up, it's time to start thinking about some salvage to scrape. There are a number of ways to do this. We can take salvage contracts or look for derelict ships left over from bounties. However, the best thing for a solo player in a Vulture is going to be panels. Panels, unlike salvage contracts, don't eat into any of your profits by costing you money, because you can just find them yourself out in the wild. Panels appear in much the same way and much the same places as mineable asteroids. They're basically just a randomized spawn in asteroid fields. Now, a lot of people will go for panels around the Lagrange points, since it gives you a nice easy base of operations at one of the Lagrange point stations, and short travel times. However, I am a bit more of a paranoid android than the average SC player, and it served me in pretty good stead up until this point. So my recommendation, if you truly want to minimise your risk of encountering someone who wants to use your Vulture as a loot pinata, is to head deep into the Aran Halo. The Halo is a vast asteroid belt that spans the gap between ArcCorp and Crusader, and goes in a ring all the way around the Stanton star. It sits in dead space with no QT markers to jump to. If you know the rough distance at which to drop out of a jump between your starting location and a target destination, then you'll be able to make it there. Thankfully, you don't even need to do any of the science for this, since the folks over at Cornerstone have already done it for you. On their website, which I will link in the video description down below, you'll find maps to take you from every refinery station to the Halo via a number of different routes. So I'm going to be starting out from ARC-L1 Wide Forest Station, and I'm going to switch over to Nav Quantum mode and set a course for Crew L4. We'll start the jump, and then we'll do a little bit of magic video editing to cut ahead, because we're going to be on the lookout for our distance approaching about 15.9 GM. At this point, hold that left mouse up button down again to cut the jump, and voila, we're in the middle of the Aran Halo, and frankly, not a soul in the server will be able to pinpoint where we are for the duration. So there's absolutely zero danger of anyone sneaking up on us while we're scraping away or shifting boxes around in our cargo hold. So now that we're in the middle of the Halo, it's time to start looking for panels, and we do this using our ship scanners. Use the middle mouse button to switch to nav scan and let out a first ping by pressing tab. The initial ping will be a 360 degree burst that will return anything of interest within about 13 to 14 kilometers of the ship. We then want to look at each of these returns by moving the crosshair onto the return bubble. When you do that, you'll see a number crop up above the crosshair. Now that gives you the signature of the return. The key thing that makes panels quite easy to find when you know what you're doing is that they always give returns as multiples of 2000. Asteroids, which are the other thing that these returns could be, give all kinds of funky returns, multiples of 1750, 1850, 1950, etc. But never round 2000s like the panels. So we just ignore every return that isn't 2000 or a multiple thereof. You can use the still highlighted jump marker to tell when you've spun a full 360 degrees around and checked everything that your scanner returned. And if you don't find a panel on the first go, don't worry. Ultimately there are going to be more asteroids than panels out here, we just need to keep looking. Now we could always fly on in the ship using our hydrogen engines until we put enough distance in to get some new returns, but that's going to slow things down quite a bit. And if we're aiming for a decent aUEC per hour rate, then we want to cut all of the corners that we can. So rather than this, we're going to just use our QT drive. Switch back over to Nav Quantum with middle mouse, line up on Crew L4 again, and punch the jump, but then almost immediately cut it again with left mouse. Just this tiny QT jump will easily have covered more than that 20 kilometers or so that you'll need, so you'll be surrounded by entirely new space and ping returns. Doing it this way, before long you'll identify clusters of panels like this one. So now we want to start heading in that direction. And as you approach, you want to narrow the width of your scan by scrolling up on the mouse wheel, and let out further pings to pinpoint the exact location of the cluster. If you lose it at all, just roll back on the mouse wheel to widen the scan again, let out another ping and you'll re-identify the bubble. Eventually, rather than the scan bubble, you'll get a far more accurate idea of where the individual panels are. Now this is where things get a little bit Star Citizen. Currently panels are a bit buggy in that they only render when they're quite close to your ship. So there's a weird dead zone between about 1.5 kilometers out and right on the things where you can't necessarily see them. I recommend getting lined up on one of the returns in the middle of the cluster, and driving forward very slowly for that last kilometer or so, just so that you can bring your ship to a dead stop the moment that the panel springs into existence. Fingers crossed that in future patches this has been fixed, but for now this is a reasonable workaround. So now that we've found what we're looking for, it's time to start scraping. And as of patch 324.2, salvage and mining ships no longer need to switch into SCM mode in order to activate their lasers. And since there's no real danger around us, we don't actually need our shields. You can either cycle modes using middle mouse button, or you can press M to jump straight to the salvaging mode. Let's take a minute here to just take a quick look at the salvage HUD. Since we've got two lasers on the Vulture, we essentially have a mirrored HUD, with details of our currently active modules, in this case the Abrade, and our secondary one, the Trawlers I've got on mine, in the upper left and upper right. You can switch between modules just by right clicking. Below this and slightly more centered, we have a readout of what our lasers are currently pointing at. So in this case we can see that because we're lined up on the panel, both lasers are centered on RMC, and that currently 100% of the mats are available in that circle, since we haven't started scraping anything yet. On the side of these circles is a range indicator, showing that at about 103 meters out, we're in a nice spot, not too hot, not too cold. And below the circles we've got our gathering rate indicators, again currently at 0 because we're not scraping. But as we do start pulling in mats, these will show that the yields we're pulling in. Then down in the bottom right, to the right hand side of our fuel gauges, we've got details of our depot and filler station. The Vulture's got a 13 SCU depot or buffer, meaning that we can gather up that amount in the internals of the ship before we need to worry about printing boxes to clear it out. For anyone who's been around for a while, this makes the Vulture a total joy versus the old days of getting in and out of the seat every 2 boxes. Up in the top centre of the screen, we've got details of the active mode. So in this case, showing that both heads are operational and that they're in scraping mode. You can also see fracturing and disintegrating mode here, but for the purposes of this guide, it really isn't something you need to worry about, since we're only concerned with RMC gathering, and we don't want to fracture anything for construction mats. One thing you might want to be aware of, particularly if you're using a stock loadout on a rental, is the ability to switch off one head at a time. So since you're better off using one Abrade than 2 cinches, you can always do this by holding Alt and pressing 2 or 3 to select a specific laser. Alt plus 1 selects both lasers again. But assuming you've got a pair of Abrades selected, click left mouse button once to start scraping RMC off the panel. I like to position myself with a decent view of the entire face, and then press G to activate gimbaled mode on my lasers. This will let you just move the mouse around to direct the lasers, but keep in mind that while it's active, the mouse won't control the pitch of your ship. I've seen many different approaches to scraping, from the people who like to flick the laser back and forth as much as possible, those who keep it firmly rooted until every scrap in an area is sucked up. Personally, I like to take a methodical approach of slowly moving the laser so that it's pretty much always in motion, but that I'm not missing any spots on the panel, so I just maximise the output. I would also say keep an eye on what's actually happening in front of you on the panel itself, rather than over-relying on the HUD readout to tell you what's happening. You'll be able to see which areas need scraping, which areas don't. And once we've cleaned up the one side of this panel, I can press G again to ungimbal and swing the ship around to the other facing. Then I would press G again to reactivate the gimbals and clean off this area. Panels come in 3 types. We've got these large ones which contain around 4 SCU of RMC. Then we've got the medium-sized triangular version which has just under 3 SCU. And then these small sliver pieces which have just shy of 1 SCU. With the medium and the smalls, you should be able to position to get all the mats from one spot since they only have one good face, but you'll need to move a little bit for the larger panels. Or you can, if you've still got it attached, use a tractor beam to spin the panel. Personally, I find that more hassle than it's worth, and I'd rather just move the ship. So once you've finished the first panel, move on to the next in the cluster. With this popping in and out bug, this can be a bit fiddly, so just slowly move your ship left to right until the next one pops in. As you scrape a panel, the outline is going to change from green to yellow to red as the amount of mats is depleted. You can target panels while in salvaging mode to check the outline. So if it's green, it's a fresh one. If it's red, you probably just got turned around a bit and you're looking at one that you've already scraped. Ultimately, you want to just keep going with this process until your filler station is full. You might get lucky like I did and find enough panels to fill up on one go, You might have to just fall back to the scanning phase and look for the next lot. But once your filler station caps out at 13 SCU capacity, just stop scraping immediately by shutting your lasers off with left mouse button. Anything that you scrape while you don't have the room in your buffer is just going to be wasted. Hop out of the chair and head through the mini hab to the back ladder down to the cargo hold. The filler station is just on your immediate right through the door, and you'll want to interact with this panel. It does have crafting options for a tractor beam on another tab, but right now we just want to empty the RMC boxes out from it. On the Vulture we've only got the option to print one SCU crate, so let's just go ahead and select eject to start printing a box. You will get your handheld tractor beam out, and use the detaching mode by pressing right mouse button to lift the box and place it back on the cargo grid. To save some time, we can also select the auto eject checkbox in the bottom right of the panel, just so that we don't have to eject each box manually. You'll just have to keep up with moving these off the exit port to keep the printing rolling. So it's worth thinking about positioning from the start. While the Vulture's snappable cargo grid has room for 12 SCU of cargo, it is possible for us to stuff a fair bit more into this area, enhancing our UEC per hour by bringing home more crates per run. And I like to start planning this from the very beginning. So rather than using the forwardmost spaces on the grid on the first print, I'll also make sure to stack some boxes down the side of the grid at this stage while I've got more room to move around them. You can effectively expand out the 2 wide, 3 deep, 2 high grid, with a third extra row on the side also stacked 2 high, and we can subsequently get fruitier with it on subsequent prints. Once the depot's emptied out though, it's time to head back to the cockpit and resume scraping and scanning for panels until we're full again. And thanks to the magic of video editing, we're back at a full depot. So now we want to start using all the available space that we've got remaining. We can fill out the rest of this now 3x3 grid, and then we can start using the additional space in between the filler stations and the door. Once you've blocked your way a little bit, you might have to do a little jump tractor beam to pull it over the top of the other boxes that are in the way. And if you lose the pace, just click on continue ejecting once you've cleared whatever's blocking the way. So we've got 4 more boxes in that part, then 1 more printed on the output slab. So in total we crammed all 13 boxes from the first print and 11 more from the second into the cargo hold, leaving us with 2 SCU in the depot. Now before we head home, it's time to scrape and scan and scrape once more to fill up the whole depot before we head into sell. So with our cargo hold and our depot full, it's time to head back into port. And as ever, I'm going to consider some of the risks like the paranoid android that I am. To sell up, we need to head back to one of the major landing zones, Lorville on Hurston, Orison on Crusader, New Babbage on Microtech, or my choice since it's my nearest option, Area 18 on ArcCorp. It is also possible to sell this at scrapyards and stuff, but you get lower prices and you're taking way more risks, so if you've legally obtained your LRMC, definitely worth just taking it to a major LZ. However, there is a slim chance that given the jump angles would narrow significantly as we approach the planet, a very wily and patient pirate could set up a snare with a mantis that could catch us as we get close to our destination. So to nullify this risk, I'm going to just add in a dogleg jump on my way back. First I'll plot a course for somewhere completely unrelated. I'm going to start by heading to mil-spec. I'm just going to jump about 1 million kilometers, then I'm going to cut my drive, and then I'm going to make the jump to AC itself. This way I'm just going to be totally off the beaten track, and what was already a very, very small risk of interdiction is reduced to pretty much 0. This might all seem like a bit much to some people, but my view on it is you've already put in nearly all the work in making your payday, so for the sake of an extra minute of your time, it's better to just avoid the risk entirely. When you reach your hangar at the LZ, land with the back of the Vulture nice and close to the cargo elevator to save yourself time and hassle. Then start unloading the boxes into it. Here a large tractor beam can potentially be a little bit quicker, but you do have to keep in mind that the interaction can be a bit janky, and it might try to pick up the entire ship rather than just the boxes. And once the cargo hold itself is unloaded, head to the filler station and get the last 13 SCU out of the depot and onto the elevator too. Just don't forget to keep yourself hydrated, as this part in particular can be quite thirsty work. But once you're all stacked up, send the cargo elevator down to add the boxes to your local inventory. I'm not 100% sure what happened to it, but somewhere in the course of this, one of my 37 boxes did a bit of a runner, so I was left with 36. Still, not too shabby. Once this is all done, it's time to head into the city and find the Trade and Development Division, or TDD building. Here at Area 18, we want to take the metro line into the Plaza District. You'll find a TDD with the common heraldry at each of the major LZs, except for Lawville, where it's slightly different, it's the Central Business District. Once you're here, you'll want to come up to one of the terminals and interact with it, bringing up the trade menu. From the inventory drop-down on the left, select Area 18 for your local inventory, and the RMC itself will pop up. So here at Area 18, I'm getting 12.72k per SCU, with a click on max and then sell to cash in the lot for just shy of 500,000 credits. So I know I'm going to face a few questions or accusations of clickbait about the 500k an hour claim, but this total round trip in this vid took me 53 minutes from start to finish. I would also cut out some time if I was doing it for real by not selling up every time I land at Area 18. Instead, I'd just unload my Vulture into the cargo elevator and send it to my local inventory, then I'd just head straight back out into space without doing the full tram ride into the city to sell. Then maybe once every 3 to 4 trips, I'd make that sell run, reducing the time taken by a fair amount since a trip into the city easily eats up 5 to 10 minutes. So if I can get the average run time down to about 45 to 50 minutes with this technique, then it does stack up to 500k an hour, which is the target I set myself. So I hope that this guide helps you start raking in the cash with your Drake Vulture. For non-combat enthusiasts, this is probably one of the most consistently profitable loops that should help you try and buy everything that you want in the game, particularly since the prices of ships have all taken a big step up since 3.23. I decided with Salvage that I would separate out this guide and one I plan to make in the near future on the Reclaimer. For me here, the mechanics are quite different, as is the buy-in, with the Vulture being yours to own for under 3 million, while the Reclaimer will set you back more than 10 times that amount at 32 million. So get saving, and we'll see you back for that guide soon. Just hit the subscribe button if you want to stay tuned for that. One thing I would also say in closing is that even though the Vulture is a very well designed solo ship through and through, that's not to say it can't be used in a multiplayer oriented manner. So here's just a bit of footage from one of our more recent community events where we combined combat players taking down bounties, with a swarm of vultures to strip down everything, and a caterpillar to haul away the cargo for them. It was a rather profitable evening, although I had some reservations when I was making the landing in the cat full of 6 million's worth of cargo, and a whole lot of fun to boot, particularly when we had multiple Atlas mechs just throwing boxes here, there and everywhere to offload the ship. If you would like to get involved with some more multiplayer action like this, then please do head down to the video description below and come join us over on Discord, where we regularly run all kinds of events. But with all that said, I just want to say thank you very much for watching all the way to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.